Welcome in to another Key of David podcast, and I'm breaking my own rule. It is 11:55. I took a red-eye flight last night, so I'm operating on very little sleep. And normally we don't do episodes at this time, especially not with Lance. Normally we do episodes with Lance early in the morning, and this one for me is coming late at night. This is a special edition Key of David podcast. I'm joined by David the Lion Douglas and one of our favorite guests, and he's like just as much a part of the show as anybody else, Lance Weaver. And tonight we recently released the first part of one of his episodes. And I had felt the prompting that I needed to reach out to Lance because I was watching it, and I was blown away myself by, I sat there in the episode, and then watching it again, it was like, this is some important stuff. We're talking timelines, we're talking prophecies, we're talking Israel. I don't know why my thing does that, but that's a water bottle, just in case you're wondering. It's just water, okay?
In the remodel fest.
Yes. But I reached out to Lance. I sent a message about how great it was. And then I proceeded to get a message and another message and another message and another message about experiences that he has had since we recorded that episode. Dreams and feelings. And I had felt the prompting like, hey, let's jump on. Let's talk about some of the things that are transpiring and maybe some of the things that Lance even said, golly, I wish I would have shared that on that episode, rewatching it himself. So, Lance, welcome to this special edition of the Key of David podcast, late at night.
As always, awesome to be here. Love hanging out with you guys.
Tell us a little bit about what's been happening.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I thought we should just get this down before, it drains out, because it's kind of crazy. Like, so we did that episode, right? And then, 3 almost consecutive nights, but 3 times just right after that. Like, I woke up one time at 4 a.m., one time at 2 a.m., another time at 5 a.m. And every time it was like I woke up in the middle of these dreams and just had this huge picture and kind of like message in my head. And it was like so forceful and so real, when I wake up. And more often, like, I have these experiences more like kind of like in that half wakeful state. It's always like right as the sun is rising. These ones are like really late. One of them, I like went outside and it was like full moon right above my head. It was really kind of wild. But it's anyway. I just feel like I need to get this out. And at the same time, like, this is like all of my stuff. On one hand, I like feel so strongly about it. It burns inside me, and it's like, oh, this is like some crazy stuff. Just really amazing. I want to get this out. On the other hand, I'm second guessing myself like continually. And I'm like, oh, I hope this actually isn't legit. I hope this isn't a real picture taken in my head. I hope that maybe this is all just in my mind, because it's not. Anyway, it's crazy stuff. It's crazy stuff. And so maybe I'll just kind of jump in really quick and give an abbreviated version, right? Because during our podcast, we talk all about, last days type stuff. And I really kind of wanted to hit home in the last thing and make the main takeaway be almost like, don't get too worked up. Don't be part of the great disappointment, like we talked about, the whole 1840s great disappointment, where everyone's like, we have all these, what do they call themselves, when you're like stocking everything, heading up to the hills because you're ready
Preppers.
for the end.
All the preppers.
There you go. All the preppers. They are ready for the second coming. They're not. They're prepping for like in 2030 and nothing beyond, because they're going to be off this earth by then, right? And I kind of wanted to really hit home, like, no, there's like the Book of Catherine and all of these prophecies, things that I've been shown in my strong feelings. It's like we have a long history to get through. And so we're trying to minimize like what's going to happen just in the next 10 or 15 years. I really tried to do that in the episode, but like the dreams I had, like when I woke up, it was like, whoa, it was almost like a chastisement from the spirit, it was like, you are minimizing something incredibly important that actually needs to be maximized. And once again, it's like, I hope this is just all in my head. I hope that it's not legit. But I think that we are in for some really intense stuff that should not be minimized. I think that, and I'll just tell you the picture that came to me, and then we'll go through some of it. Both prophecies in the Book of Catherine.
And these are part of the dreams that you're having. You're kind of being impressed upon what things look like over the next decade or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, we've all seen that guy, who does all those prophecies online, who kind of like had a vision of like Trump in his ear getting shot. And it's pretty spectacular. You can go back and that was totally legit. He had that vision before it happened, and who would have guessed the amount of detail that he had in that thing. But then he has a lot of other, you go into his stuff, he has all sorts of other stuff that seems like, that just, God, someone is at my door. We're going to have to cut this out. My goodness. What are the chances?
I'm telling you, we are going to drop some things on here, and that means interruptions and distractions. Anytime I'm
waiting for you to get into it.
No, listen, anytime I was on my mission and I was ready to share the Joseph Smith story, a knock at the door, a ring at the doorbell, and I knew it. And I started telling people, as I share this with you, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And then it would happen. They'd be like, no way. Okay.
That's smart, because that was like clockwork on our mission, wasn't it? We've all had that experience. Like the more impressive, like more spiritual it is, the more often someone's going to call or knock on the door. Okay. But anyway, so let me just jump right into it. Like I say, I hope these things are like not going to happen. Man, this came to me really, really strong. All right. And so I'm going to lay it out, and then I'm going to go through afterwards, kind of some research I did and all that. Like, if you haven't looked up and seen the way that the sequence of eclipses and things that are going on right now, and Apophis, this comet, that's on its way to Earth, how it might miss and then go through that keyhole space, in the orbit that comes back in exactly 7 years. Like, it's almost like we're living in a sci-fi movie if you're watching for all those signs, right? Because what are the chances? Like right here, when we're all expecting something to happen, to have things so crazy like the comet coming and all that, it's like, it's weird, it's like, whoa, that's can't be coincidence. Maybe it is. I don't know. Okay, so this is the impression I had. Okay, so the first time I woke up, and it was just like this really strong impression. It was like almost like a chastisement, kind of you're minimizing something that really needs to be brought to everyone's attention. Everyone needs to know about this. The second one, what was so vivid, like I saw, and it was all just kind of like this huge picture of things right as I woke up, right? And it was like Trump got elected, right? And as soon as Trump got elected, then it was like Israel understood, like, okay, we have somebody who's totally got our back. I mean, when last time he was president, he doesn't care what anyone thinks. He just does it.
He did the Abrahamic Accords. Like, he did some.
Exactly.
See, I did that. He did some really amazing things for Israel.
He moved the capital to Jerusalem, like such a political faux pas, like no, and yeah, he did it. And so I kind of saw the same thing where he gets elected, and then the government in Israel was like, okay, well, we have 4 years of real, we know that we have U.S. support because we know this president. And so we are getting it done, right? And they are in this stage right now where they are like going to just try and get rid of all their enemies, right? They're like, we're taking care of Hamas. We've tried peace for like 50 years. It didn't work in their minds. It didn't work. So we've tried this section. We're going this way, and it's all war.
Welcome in, Trevor Keys. We've started the podcast, but welcome in. He's in the middle of his dream.
All right. Yeah, I just started it, Trevor. You're not missing much.
Yeah, I caught it in the spirit world. I caught it.
Nice. Hopefully you were napping so you could totally.
No.
All right. Okay. So basically, Trump gets elected, and depending on what your perspective is a really good thing or a really bad thing, because it means that Israel is going to just really go to town on their enemies, right? The same thing that they just did to Hamas, they're going to try and do to Hezbollah in Lebanon, right? And also to any kind of terrorist factions or what they perceive as terrorist factions in the West Bank. And it was crazy because, so as part of this, the worst thing that like came to my mind and was like right there that I kind of saw in my mind happen, like I say, I really hope this doesn't happen. Really hope this is my mind, was that as part of this attack and the back and forth fire, the Dome of the Rock gets destroyed, gets bombed, like full on Dome of the Rock, not the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but the Dome on the Rock. And I remember when I like saw this in my mind, it was crazy because it was almost like at the same time I was seeing this like kid poking a hornet's nest, right? It's like two kids out and someone that he doesn't even really know it's a hornet's nest. And he's taking a stick and he's just sticking it into that hornet's nest. And you're like the friend, like standing by watching this kind of dumb kid play with his hornet's nest and he has no idea what he's doing. And like the feeling of dread that came over me, it was like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. You know what I mean? Because you knew like, this is disaster. Like I know that you think this is a good idea, but this is the most horrible, worst thing that you could ever imagine. Right. And in my mind, I've been thinking, for the last decade or so, I'd kind of pictured in my mind that as part of the end times stuff. And when I say end times, I mean, it's the end of the times of the Gentiles. Right? I don't believe that basically from the end of this year to 2035 or so, when we have these real crazy end time things happen, I don't think that that's like the rapture and that the end of the world is happening, right? It's the end of the times of the Gentiles. It is like the turnover, the same thing that happened when Israel was destroyed. It's a total turnover of civilization, right? Like the fourth turning. There's so many books written on this. So when I had pictured that maybe the Vatican would get destroyed by some extremist, Islamic group, and I thought, man, there's going to be some Islamic group that's like crazy and who would do that, and it's going to make Christians so mad, and it's going to cause a war. But it's like, no, it's the opposite. It's like hard right, a Jewish group that kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, and for some reason has decided that they think the way to make themselves safe is to stoke war and try and get rid of their enemies now because they're worried that when Iran gets nuclear weapons, there'll be no more window, no more chance for them to do it. And I'm not really speaking to the morality, what's right or what's wrong, but the hornet's nest that this causes, that the Al-Aqsa Mosque, man, I hope this doesn't happen, but gets destroyed. And then it pisses off the Islamic world, rightfully.
So the Hornets the Hornets are like the Islamic world.
Absolutely.
No.
Absolutely.
The Hornets are Israel going and poking all these guys with all their, provocative things that they're doing. I mean, I'm on a text thread with Shane and Angie, and I've texted a couple times, Israel's kicking the hornet's nest. Those exact words.
So the hornet's nest is the Muslim nations. The kid that's kicking the hornet's nest is Israel. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And they have in their mind a rationale. Like I say, it's solid from their perspective, where it's like, well, if Iran gets nuclear weapons, we're screwed. We've got to take care of all of this and secure our borders before that happens. Right? We're being pressed to do this. But it was crazy how, like, I'm far more sympathetic to Israel. But when in this dream, it was crazy because I had a view that was different than my waking state. And I don't know if you guys have ever had that, where then you kind of come to and you're like, well, why was I thinking like that? It's
Totally.
Like I had a completely different mindset given to me. And the mindset was like, don't do this. Just don't do this. And they did it.
Yeah, there's a video of I'm not sure who the leader is, but they were interviewing a Muslim, literally talking about it being a hornet's nest that they're going to mess with if they go cross a certain line. So this has been in the media already, talking about this very thing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So then what happens?
Before you go to there, can I ask really quick, just timetable wise, this is after Trump or in Trump's presidency? Was it clear to you?
In his presidency. And not only that, they are using the full 4 years of his presidency to just like one after another, just try and really eradicate anything they perceive as a terrorist threat in Lebanon, in Syria, and in the West Bank, right? They've already done it in Gaza. So they're really trying to just grow their borders. But so this is the horrible part. is because while Trump is president, and they can't really kick back because he's constantly being like, if you guys try and fight him, we're here, you know, and we've got all this presence there, just like we do now. But while he's doing this, the Democrats, right? So the left has turned, and during this whole thing, like right now, they are very pro-Israel, but they turn anti-Israel. Absolutely. Like once this happens, all their political heads decide, nope. And they start plotting, you know, in his presidency, that when they gain power of the White House, that they are going to abandon Israel. And that's exactly what happens. Your one term, right? This is just what I saw. So we'll see whether this is all in my head or whether it happens. Go.
Or you know what's interesting, and I believe in multiple timelines, and so we may have visions or dreams or experiences of timelines that could happen based on the agency of man, and so who knows? It could be another timeline that you're seeing, but boy, what you're saying is pretty interesting, especially as it relates to the prophecies of Ben Catherine.
Yeah, and that's what I want to
Very
go through.
specific.
And I just want to I mean, it was really quite vivid. When I have these things, and I usually have kind of more of these vivid experiences, I almost always afterwards will kind of do research. Like a lot of times there'll be like scriptures and stuff that come to me where it's like, I don't ever remember even reading those. And I'll go look it up and I'll be, whoa, yeah, look at that. It's legit. That's wow.
Where did it go from there?
Okay. So then he only serves one term. And after that, Democrats take, and they have already basically given the Islamic world like the heads up that they're not going to support Israel. And as soon as it turns over again, now this coalition of groups then attacks them, right? And I mean, that aspect is not new, that the whole Gog and Magog we already kind of talked about. It's just basically Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan, and even Saudi Arabia is part of it, which is kind of surprising to me, more Saudi Arabia actually than Iran. They totally attack Israel, right? And this is not like the final war when the Sunnis and the Shias have a showdown. That's actually later. But this is like pretty bad. And it's so the part that's so crazy, like, so right now,
did you say if Egypt was part of it?
So the Book of Catherine says that Egypt is actually going to be the peacemaker, that Turkey will become a part of it. If there's this first thing though, it is primarily like the Hezbollah forces. It's primarily Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, to a lesser
Iran, which are all Iranian proxies.
Right. Yeah, and it seems to me that Iran, I don't know, but it seemed like Iran actually is doing it through its proxies more. They're trying not to do direct attacks still.
Yeah, they are.
And I mean, the Book of Catherine kind of makes it pretty clear, and same with the Bible, that this thing really affects Syria. By the time it ends, because it starts a total war. It's not the huge regional war, but it's a pretty bad war. And by the end of it, Damascus is like, I mean, it's pretty bad. So, but what I want to go through is the other things that kind of came through me. I've watched like a number of the Pickerings stuff, right? That got kind of their prophetic timeline.
Well, so it's interesting. It's interesting you bring them up, because I've had people that have watched your episode reach out to me and say, "Hey, is Lance familiar with the Pickerings and the Pickerings model?"
Yeah, and it's funny because I had never even heard of them until I think we did our first thing, and I think I read in the comments or somebody mentioned it, and so I looked them up, and then it was like, "Oh yeah, this is really interesting." But I had never heard of them before that, so I've known about them for a month or so, maybe 2 months. But I've watched a lot of their videos since then. And like when I did the thing earlier, I was almost kind of trying to kick back from that, because a lot of they have great stuff, just amazing. I really think they're amazing people and have a lot of inspiration. But I don't agree with the idea where they're kind of thinking like it's basically the rapture, the resurrection. Adamon Diamon is happening in 31. Like it's all there. I'm like, no.
I agree with you. I think that's the big mistake people make, is they don't understand what the second coming is.
So could it be that something really big is happening at that date, but it's not what we're expecting as the second coming, or what is it?
No, I think absolutely.
There's something to those dates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
And that's what I want to, because they have that 2,300 years between the end of this year, right? Hanukkah of this year, 24. And then there's a 2,300 year period until like the middle of 31 or something. And I can't remember what they call that, but I mean, if you read that in Daniel, when it's talking about the the 2300 days, right? It's pretty specific that it's like, well, this is when, let's read it. Let's go to it. Can we
Yeah.
read that really quick?
Let's do this.
Pull it.
Are we Daniel 7
Let's
And-
see.
or Daniel 9?
I think it's 8.
Okay, and as you're Googling this and pulling this up, are we not going to talk about what happened afterwards? Because it's killing me.
Wait,
What?
we are, because
Afterwards, what do you mean afterwards?
After we just got into a certain period of time, like he hasn't told us what happens afterwards. And and he
Well-
said in the text message, things get really bad.
Israel gets absolutely attacked, right? And it is a lasting war, I don't want to say things that weren't there, but it was a very ugly situation with Jerusalem and Israel being attacked, where there were lots of casualties. And not only that, the casualties were innocents, right? Where Israel is at least trying very hard to not kill innocents. Like, they're not targeting innocents. Like, innocents are targeted in the attack on Jerusalem and upon Israel. And so you have a huge number of very innocent people, like completely, we're not talking like Gazans who are raised wanting Israel to die.
Hey,
right?
before we read this, can I say something? I just want to get it on the record for humanity and history. I think Israel has committed crimes of humanity for killing over 30,000 women and children in Gaza, regardless of how unjustified and horrible and disgusting what they did on October 7th was. My heart is like absolutely broken. Their blood is crying out from the earth, just like it says so in the Book of Mormon. And I believe that justice is on the horizon for Israel. Now, I've always felt the kinship to the Israeli people. I've always been pro-Israel. I've always thought it's cool how the Christian nations have like aligned to support Israel. There's so much there. But man, if Netanyahu isn't a ballsy dude, and man, if Zionism isn't a pretty aggressive plan, like if we were running Zionism as Mormons, bro, it would have taken us Mormons out. And they did with Deseret. And so, yeah, I digress.
No. So let's key in on that, right? Because this is like, I think, the lesson of what's going to make us be able to be exalted. Like, this end times situation is all about trying to really polarize people and have them switch back and forth between, like this. We all see things black and white, good, bad, good, bad. These guys are good. These guys are bad. Like, we're going to have this period where good and evil are switched back and forth so many times that suddenly everybody who just kind of labels everything and sees things black and white is going to be forced to think.
So you'll go, just as Trevor's saying about Israelis in, whoever is next up after Trump, you're going to be like, man, these innocent Israelis are being killed. These innocent women and children are being killed by Hezbollah. And so now you're going to shift back to feeling sorry for the people that you know.
Exactly. And it's like purposefully like that, because there's going to be like this environment that has that happen over and over. Like before,
and instead of it being 30,000 indiscriminate and trying not to kill, it's going to be discriminate and targeting civilian areas, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, when October 7th happened, right? You're like, Hamas is so horrible. I can't believe Hamas did this. I'm so on Israel's dying. And now suddenly you're like, oh, now Israel's killed even more. That's so horrible. Like, now maybe I'm against Israel.
So the shift,
and then suddenly,
we've seen that shift happen just in what's going on over there in the past, 10 months or so.
Yeah. And the mosque will get destroyed and everyone will be like, oh, Israel has gone way off their rocker. They're so horrible. And then suddenly Israel will get attacked, way worse. And you're like, oh, God, no, Israel is poor Israel. It's this. Like, it's going to be like mind-boggling.
Lance, would you explain the difference between the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque?
Yeah, two
that would be
totally
great.
separate buildings, right? So if we kind of have a picture in our mind of what the Temple Mount looks like, the center section of it has the Dome on the Rock, and it is really just a shrine. It is not a mosque, right? So it's the location where most people, even though there's a lot of people who think that the temple was over on like the Dome of the Spirits or kind of near there, but most people accept the Dome of the Rock as the location of Solomon's temple and the second temple, right? So it's the holy spot for Jerusalem, and yet it doesn't have a mosque on it. It has a shrine called the Dome of the Rock, right? And then the Al-Aqsa Mosque is actually kind of over in the corner, and it's the more holy spot. It's the actual mosque that they go in and they pray at that is the more holy.
Is that where Allah ascended?
He had like a dream, where there was like an ascension in his dream and it's not even mentioned specifically, but it's assumed that the surah in the Quran is talking about the Al-Aqsa Mosque, right? And it's kind of funny because like they could take, and this is almost what I kind of pictured happening, and maybe it's just me wishful thinking, but you could take and build the temple, the third temple right there over the Dome of the Rock, and have on one side of it Al-Aqsa Mosque, and have on one side of it a new Christian cathedral or something, and they would both be like in the court of the Gentiles appropriately, and then have the Jewish temple between them as like this place that brings the two faiths together, which is my vision of the future of really what this new movement that the Book of Catherine starts is going to do. It's going to bring together Christianity and Islam, right? By polarizing it first and then forcing people to get back together, you know?
Hey, it makes sense. I know I got in a fight in elementary school with a guy, and after the fight, he and I became really good friends. So maybe that's going to work.
Yeah. I mean, once you've had enough blood, you're kind of like, you just get tired of it, and at least hope that that's what's going to happen. But so let's go to Daniel 8 and just read it really quick, because it hits home on this idea of like switching your allegiance back and forth. Like who's in the right, who's in the right and the wrong. So I think it's verse 14, right? So if you scroll down to verse 14, and let's actually start up in 12. So in 12, it's saying, so this kind of evil person comes and says, and a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. It was cast down, right? So the daily sacrifice stops, which nowadays is like your daily prayer, actually, in both Christianity and Islam. The daily sacrifice is their prayer. And it says, and I heard one saint speaking, another saint said unto the certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? Right? So that's specific. It's saying that the 2,300 days, it's asking, well, how long is the sanctuary going to be trodden underfoot and the daily be stopped? Right? So if, and this is kind of what I saw, if this actually happens from like possibly December of this year or early next year, right? But possibly at Hanukkah this year to 2030, that 2,300 days. And in it is when Israel is basically totally going around being bullies. Then who's the good guy? The good guy is Islam, because it's Islam that's going to be getting kind of crapped on during this 2,300 day period. Does that make sense? Like it's Islam it's Israel that's actually stopping the daily. And this is something I kind of tried to touch in our old thing, but in our last podcast, where the 490-year period is repeated 7 times, like it's just like Moses said, that there'd be 7 times they'd be held captive and 7 times they'd be returned. It's 7 periods of 490 years. At the end of every single one, there's this kind of fulfillment of a tribulation period and a Messiah figure, both the good and the bad, Christ and Antichrist. And it's kind of interesting as you go through that symbology, you see that, just like I'm saying, the good guy switches back and forth, like over and over. Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? They're always switching back and forth. So here it's like we have the actual, the sanctuary that's being trodden underfoot is Islam's sanctuary. But
and says, it's interesting because it says to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot. That's an interesting thing when you start breaking down Islam and Jerusalem, and you're looking at those two groups.
Right. And maybe viewers can like leave their comments, on how they see this all going down and how they see that. But I've seen that a lot as I kind of look at the situation of what's going on and see like, well, who is the prophetic good guy and who is the prophetic bad guy? As we see Israel and Hamas fighting right now, like one whole group of people looks at Hamas as the savior, as the Christ, the martyrs, right? They are the ones who are getting killed just like Christ and who are walking, into martyrdom, whereas Israel is the bad guy. And then a whole other group of people sees it completely the different. That it's like, well, Hamas is the bad guy and Israel is like the martyrs. And everyone has to make that judgment as this tribulation period comes over the next 15 years. And we just see back and forth. And you're trying to decide, who do I even root for? Right? But that actually brings about the condition in your heart that we need for salvation, because the answer is to love everyone, like to not necessarily take a side, like to see them all as God would see them, right? Children of God, and just be heartbroken for all death. But also see the promises that have to be fulfilled and try and figure out, how can we fulfill these promises that have to be fulfilled that have been made to people? Anyway, crazy stuff. But I want to go over. So the next step I just kind of want to do is I want to, after I finish this, I kind of thought about the the Pickerings, and some of their stuff. And what came to me was like, well, look up eclipses and 7-year cycles, especially in seven cycles of 7, which is a jubilee, right? When you have 7 sabbaticals, it's a jubilee. 7 times 7, 49 years.
49. Yep.
And when I started looking that up, it was like, whoa, this is really crazy. Like, there's a lot of stuff that falls right.
Are there a lot of them?
Yeah, there totally
No
is.
way.
So, and in fact, if I could share my screen and you could see some of the things I've been looking at. Let's see. Let me try and share my screen.
Share your screen.
Has anything big happened right before after them in world history?
Totally. So far, totally.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back 49 years, 49 years, 49 years.
Israel became a state at a jubilee, or something in 1948. I think it was a jubilee. When you look at it, those jubilees are big years. We're either this year or next year. It's like a double jubilee or something like that, where everybody's debts are forgiven. There's some really interesting things when you start looking at these jubilee periods.
Have you guys ever heard of the Book of Numbers? There's like this Jewish, kind of a medieval Jewish mystical text called the Book of Numbers, where this guy totally predicted that in 490 years, 10 jubilees, that he talks about how that the Ottomans would take Jerusalem, and then it would be 8 jubilees, and it would be liberated, and then it would be no man's land for 1 jubilee, and then the Messiah would come right after that. Have you guys ever read that? Just I'll do a Google search for, pretty sure it's called Book of Numbers Jubilee Prophecy, Israel Jubilee Prophecy.
Where are we at on that prophecy? How accurate is it? Have people lined it up?
Oh yeah, it's exact. It's like full on exact.
Yeah, you go even watch Messiah 30. It's all Messiah 2030 timelines done by non-LDS.
They cover this
They
thing.
use jubilees. Yeah, it's a big deal.
I have the guys here. I'll find it really quick. I have it right here. The guy's name is, okay, let's see. Maybe I shouldn't take so much time doing it.
It's all right.
What's his name? It's like, dang it, I thought I had it right there.
That's all right. So
Okay.
just talk to us a little bit about the jubilees and how it fits in. Trev,
Okay.
can you mute?
While he's searching that, let me just tell you, Alien Romulus is the best movie I've seen in a long time. Like, I was sweaty palms. It was so well done.
It's wild,
And
huh?
those aliens are so terrifying, and it fits in that, it's Ridley Scott, and it fits in that Prometheus alien anthology.
Is it trying to tell us of things to come?
Let's hope
Well,
not. That.
I sure
Okay, I found
hope
it.
not. I
Seriously.
sure hope not.
Definitely.
These things are
Okay.
horrifying.
Okay, his name is Judah ben Samuel, right? And he predicted in 12th century Book of Calculations that Israel would be captive by the Ottomans for 8 jubilees, then Jerusalem would be no man's land for 1 jubilee, and then be restored to the Jews after 1 more jubilee, right? And so you've got 1517 when the Ottomans took Jerusalem, and then to the 8 jubilees lands you at 1967. and then plus one more jubilee puts you to 2017, right? Which is
the Abrahamic Accords. They become
and it ties into the one I'm about to talk about, right? So pretty
Holy crap.
pretty wild, right? So Judah ben Samuel, he called it like on the year to be able to go straight from the Ottomans and count out jubilees and have it land exactly on 1967 when they recapture the Temple Mount. Like, what are the chances of that? Is that just a coincidence? That's pretty wild, right? Like, there's definitely something to this whole like numbers thing. Like, the angels are making it happen. Okay, so the one that can you see? Can you share my screen really quick? If you look right here, yeah, there you go, and see where I'm highlighting down here. We've got these, like, it started. So if you count out 7 sabbaticals, right, 7 periods of 7. And then in the midst of each week, if you remember so people have to go to the what's their names again? Pickerings. I'm never going to get that. I apologize to them that I get it. So yeah, the Pickerings go to theirs because they have this offset where they've got one timeline and another one, and they're both offset by the 3.5 years. Because the whole Book of Daniel thing is that you have this final 7-week thing, and then in the midst of the week is Messiah cut off, right? And then you have another 3.5, and it picks up. And so they kind of offset these 2 7-year periods. And so look how interesting this is. Like in 2010, if you're going to say that's kind of the beginning of this 7 sets of 7, you had a super unique eclipse, right? The December 2010 eclipse, right? This was the first eclipse in almost 500 years that falls right on the winter solstice, right? And so it ends up being like a really strong blood moon. I think I can remember when this thing happened, right? People are trying to make a big deal out of how strong the blood moon was. And it's right there basically on Christmas. It's right on the winter solstice. And it hasn't happened since like the 15th century, right? 16th centuries. And these things actually tend to fall on those 490-year periods, like about once every 500 years. So that happens on one of them. And then you have 2017 is the next sabbatical. And what happened in 2017, right? We had the eclipse in Utah or in Wyoming, right? We had Trump made Jerusalem the capital. We had that whole Revelation 12 thing where there was a woman in the sky, right?
Yeah. So you had September, like Virgo thing happen. You have the August 21st solar eclipse. Yeah, 2017, there were some things happening in that sky.
Yeah, just like some really significant things.
Do you guys remember it was such a big deal that tons of evangelicals thought that it was the sign of the rapture and staked their reputations on it, and like we're talking major credibility lost in the YouTube community. Do you guys remember all that?
Yeah. I think the same thing is kind of going to happen too with this whole great disappointment. But really, the way that I see this, right, is these ancient prophets, like they built these calendars. They built the Jewish calendar in line with what they knew the eclipses would do. Like, it is built according to lunar cycle. It's a lunar solar calendar.
Well, and then you go 2017 to 2024, and you get the April 8th solar eclipse.
Yeah.
Another 7 years.
X marks the spot.
Yeah. And midway through that week,
all over the world.
Midway through that 2017 sabbatical was COVID, right? And when everything was shut down in Israel and the temples were shut down with us, that was like right there in the midpoint of that sabbatical.
And some people say maybe that is part of the daily sacrifice on some timelines. That's part of the daily sacrifice being shut down. But I think there's almost 2 timelines that we need to look at. There's a Gentile timeline, or we'll call it a Joseph timeline, and then there's a Judah timeline.
Yeah.
And things are happening different for both.
And I kind of showed that before in the other podcast, how there's a really strong one as far as the 132-year offset every single cycle, and 132 years before all this was the restoration. But anyway, so let's just go through a couple more of these other ones. So we had 2024, this year is the end of the second sabbatical, right? The beginning of the third sabbatical. And we've had the eclipse. And so if at the end of this year, right, in December 2024, this stuff starts to go down right after Trump gets elected, like I said, pray that we're wrong here, but holy cow, people, if we're not wrong, like if this goes down, everyone needs to be like, okay, I'm listening. You know what I mean? Like we've been like coincidence enough. But if it keeps happening on these days, like I can be really skeptical myself of my own thoughts. Like if this happens, I am going to be like, holy crap. Okay, I got to rearrange
Yeah,
really prepare and really.
It's time. It's time.
Yeah.
And I think Trump not getting killed is just another sign. And a lot of people have said blood on the right ear, like they're pulling prophecy of what blood on the right ear means.
That's
and
true.
So
really
like
and just the fact that it got
prophesied,
like having that dude prophesy it so specifically in his little vision.
I
You can't
know
make that stuff up. You can't make that up. It's so specific, like holy cow. Anyway, that's
okay.
wild. So the next one though is 2031, right? So we've got 2024. So if it happens, then 2031 is the next one, and that is like the Pickering's date. And so I kind of see that.
Could that be the 144,000 experience? Could that be a part? You had talked your timeline being, yes, Christ returns, but a little bit here to these people, and it's not the big showdown, the Gog Magog showdown, but there is this, and so then you get people like, I could see our Heavenly Father, because He loves all of His children, like having Christ appear to certain people. They go out and testify and say, no, we saw Him, and more and more people believe before the big and final showdown, where every knee shall bow and tongue confess that Jesus is the Christ.
Yeah. And the 2031 is in the midst of this Jubilee, the very center of the Jubilee, right? And it is the week that most of the things point to, including the Pickering timeline, as far as being the actual 70th week of the Gentiles. And so let's jump really quick to the Book of Catherine, because it gives some really specific prophecies for that 7th week of the Gentiles.
We've had a lot of people ask about the Book of Catherine since this episode just aired. They can go to gatheredin.1 and they can get a copy of the Book of Catherine there, and they can see kind of all your timeline work there as well, right, Lance?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it a digital copy? Is it a digital copy? What is it?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's just an HTML page. So if you go in there under prophecy and then see the very first article as introduction to the Book of Catherine, and then under that, there's links to it.
Do you have it in PDF? Do you have it in PDF, Lance?
Yeah, I do.
Get that to us. Have you ever played with GPT uploading a full PDF and being able to like quiz it and find things?
Ah, that's brilliant. I've never done that. I've had to find things out of text, but not a PDF.
You can upload an entire PDF, like a couple of them at a time, and you can say, I want you to find these correlations. Are there any, I want you to sort every single thing that looks like a prediction or a prophecy or a hint towards something, and it'll like collate them for you, and it's really good at recognizing them.
Yeah, and maybe if you can send us over a PDF, one of the things we can do is include that on our page with the Nemanhah records as well.
Yeah, right in the description.
So people can download it and check it out.
Okay. Yeah. Totally do that. Okay. So let's read this really quick, and then we'll kind of wrap up here. But I mean, it's lots of just really interesting ideas. Like, I hope people keep in mind. And this is one thing. Like, if this stuff happens, like, I hope people come back to this video and be like, "Holy crap!" Once again,
hey,
like, if it happens, we all need.
Note to self, Jane and David, that Google form, not that Google link that goes and get access to the records. We need to turn that into a Cumorah, and let's name it Cumorah, and we can tell people in future episodes, oh, you need you want that book? That's in Cumorah. Oh, you need the Mike Rigby book? That's in Cumorah. All of it's in Cumorah, bro.
Yeah. Love that.
Okay. All right. So when I had this experience, the Pickerings like came specifically to mind. So if people haven't seen their stuff, they should go see their stuff, because I've kind of dismissed it more than I think I should. Because like I said, that's when I kind of felt like I was being chastised, like more stuff's going to go down than you know. They really were like right there on my mind. And I know I've actually spelled their names totally wrong.
And Lance, when we talked, I don't know, 6 months ago, you were kind of had almost a little bit of a different timeline, and you're looking at the current set of events and you're like, yeah, I'm adjusting my timeline. I think some things are ratcheting up. Yeah. Is that why the Pickerings are kind of maybe starting to make a little more sense to you, because now you've shifted what your timeline is looking like based on the events that are going on?
Yeah, because I mean, I started working on these things based on the Book of Catherine, so 15 years ago, and all of my thoughts were pointing toward like the 2034 period, which is kind of like 2,000 years after Christ, essentially, before things even started. And that there would be kind of a calm period until that date, and then they would kind of start to ramp up a little bit. So, but now this idea that, whoa, they might actually have already started, that we've already been having all of these signs, that some of us has just missed, all of these eclipses and Jerusalem being made the capital, and just like a lot of, and this war that has already started, and COVID, like, holy cow, there's a bunch of stuff already happening. And the idea that it's just going to get worse between now and 2034, not that it's going to start in 2034, but that the end of this year, December, during Hanukkah of this year, like we might see an attack on the mosque or on the Dome of the Rock.
And we may see the red heifers get sacrificed around that time as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the Pickerings thing. And so we got to just watch and see it. And if nothing significant happens, then we can just be like, oh, okay, we got to still just kind of wait. It's probably going to be more chill than anyone thinks. But if it does happen, I think everyone should really take their hedge. You need to be telling all your friends and family, it's time to perk up and really start paying attention to this whole last days mumbo jumbo. Okay, but check out this prophecy, right? So in this is the Book of Catherine, right? And I'm just going to read a part of this because this is really awesome. Okay, he says, so, and the word of the Lord came unto me. This is unto, John ben Catherine, saying, my prophet, speak thou unto Israel this word, also this word to lay up against that day, or to bring down the high places of Rome and Carmel, and a word to shake the powers of the nations, to lay in store, a day to build the shield of Jacob, that I might bring the younger to age and set them up in that day as an anchor, a reserve I shall not deplete. No, they shall not be depleted, but they shall be a fine oil, fragrant oil, and a jug that I shall pour out on all nations, yet it shall not empty, nor its line decline.
This sounds like Isaiah, the way he's talking about different things and different places and oil. I mean, there's so much imagery. It sounds very similar to Isaiah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Every single verse is referencing like Joel, Isaiah, Ezekiel. Like you could put so many footnotes in here. And it's even kind of a little bit like Christ talking about the leaven and the lump oil as well. So he says, this is what they shall do to lay up in store against that day. In the year of the 70th Hebdomad, right? And I already said that's the same thing as the weeks, and same Greek word in Daniel. In the year of the 70th week of the Gentiles, counting from Passover to the 50th day, that's Shabbat, right? Pentecost equivalent. From Passover unto the 50th day, for I am the only shield and buckler unto Israel. Therefore, in those 50 days, let them inquire of me thusly, for I shall hear them, and there shall be no doubt. Inquire of me that with thy whole heart, and there shall not be a man or child waver. Inquire of the Lord your God. Did I come in the flesh amongst their fathers at the time appointed by my servant Daniel? I shall not hearken to a lackey, or of him that doth not inquire heavily of my spirit to know. They shall inquire thusly. In the volume of the books, is it written that I should do this? That Israel should not hearken as a body, that I should go out unto the Gentiles, and that they should hear me? No more of their excuses. They shall read and they shall inquire of me during those 50 days. They shall inquire of me and study my words daily. They shall pray with a humble heart to know. If they hearken unto thee, and if they should believe in the Lord their God with their whole heart, and if they should inquire of me with their whole heart, I shall answer them, and I shall deliver. Lo, they have hearkened. I shall keep my words there, wherefore I spoke unto Moses, and they shall not be cut off. For lo, they have hearkened unto me, and I shall swell their hearts and enliven their spirits, and I shall remove their tumultuous hearts and their tense inward parts, and I shall give them a new heart, and I shall give them peace. In those 50 days, my spirit shall search out the heart of Israel to see if they do abstain from their ways and from the idols of their minds. He that crosseth the lintel and the beams of the frame of his door I shall visit. I, or the Lord God, hath come to thy house to establish it. He hath placed it, or he that placeth it as a charm or as an idol I shall not come to. See, I am spirit, and men must worship me from a right heart. I shall open the synagogues, and Israel shall teach the nations. As Jerusalem yielded to Constantinople, and as Constantinople yielded to Rome, and as Rome yielded to Wittenberg, so shall Wittenberg yield back to Jerusalem. The time shall return. Right? If every Mormon who reads this, it should just like blow their mind, like so many allusions to Latter-day Scripture.
Beautiful too.
I mean, it is poetic, it is prophetic, it is so wrapped up in all sorts of LDS Scripture.
When I kept asking myself, when are those 50 days?
Yeah, exactly. It's whenever the 70th week of Daniel is. So it's like, why should we be interested in knowing when that 490th year is, that 70th week of Daniel? because it is this time. And I've always felt from the time I really started reading this that we'll know when it is because it will be the year of the attack. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think it will be. And that's why they're going to be like heavy heart. And that's why he says he's going to remove their tumultuous hearts, like their scared hearts. Because once...
And that tribulation can cause repentance can happen, can cause them to turn to the Lord. And so sometimes we go through these tribulations, which is what they're going to experience, because the Lord loves his children so much.
Yeah.
Well, and what I heard in there that made me want to know that time. During those 50 days, I want to be in studying scripture and prayer and seeking. I mean, that sounds like a time to seek the face of the Lord. If there's ever been invitation, it sounds like those 50 days are it, man. He's promising that they'll respond.
Yeah. And remember, like when the restoration of Ephraim, right, the LDS church, which is Ephraim, the northern kingdom, was happening, like we had people going to Israel. We had Orson Pratt prophesying up on the hill. It was for both kingdoms, even though it's primarily for Ephraim. Well, now Judah's about to be restored.
Orson Hyde.
Orson Hyde. Yeah, exactly. So now it's happening to Judah, but these words still apply to us. And I think undoubtedly where he says that I shall visit, right? I think that this is also a message to all of scattered Israel. Like if you take this serious, the Lord will visit you, right? And so that's for real. Like Christ is coming. He's going to come in temples. He's going to come in homes. He's going to come in people's hearts. So this 70th week of the Gentiles, finding out when it is, like which one of these attacks that happens that really humbles, the people that are involved in it, and us really having our hearts. Like, so this is huge, right? Because remember, God didn't care about the sacrifice in Israel. When the bull came, everyone thought, oh, it's all about God commanded them to kill a bull. But then all the prophets later came and said, I never commanded sacrifice. I wanted to look at the heart of every person who watched that bull or that lamb die. And if they had sorrow in their heart, if they had a right heart before me, then that sacrifice was acceptable because the true sacrifice was the heart, right? And so we are going to see a sacrifice. And this time it's not Jesus that's going to sacrifice. It's the nation of Israel. They will be the sacrifice. Right. And as we watch, and we're watching it right now, like Trevor, it's like you are right on because we're watching it with the Palestinians. They're a sacrifice. So any kind of war, but definitely these wars specifically are made for us so that God watches our heart when we see this death happening. And if we have a right heart, then that's when he's going to come to us.
Can I ask you guys a serious question?
Go ahead. Did he just drop off?
See, that's not coincidence. That's simply a key.
Just can I ask you a serious question, Don? While we're waiting for him to maybe come back and ask that serious question, Lance, one of the things that you said was you didn't feel like you had enough urgency in your message in these podcasts. So what is that urgency that you left out in the podcast you just did with us, and what is the message?
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing to close on because just like what I was saying, I think that the message is that we really, like if this happens, like whether maybe it'll happen later, but we really need to be watching for these signs. I think that they're coming. And I think that like with Apophis and all of these things that are crazy, we need to be watching for the signs. And we need to be looking at the sacrifice, and we need to have a right heart. And we need to be urgent in not only watching for ourselves, but getting our family to really wake up and be like, hey, like this is it. Because remember the Pentecost, the whole thing that Pentecost celebrates, that 50th day after Christ was crucified, he was appearing to people during that entire period.
Right.
And at the end of it was the resurrection. Like the resurrection started and then
that's ended. Interesting that you bring up Pentecost because maybe that 50 days is a similar time repeating itself. And during that 50 days, the Savior's coming and visiting people.
Absolutely. Because the death of Christ was the 70th week of Israel. Now we're going to have the death of people in Israel be the 70th week of the Gentiles.
Hello, that's what the 50 days is. You're supposed to seek the face of the Lord.
Yeah. And the resurrection
that's why we need to find out when these 50 days are.
Let me ask you a question. Did you drop off when you hit Centerville?
Yes.
There's a dead spot in Centerville, and I knew exactly where he was, and boom, gone. Okay,
So, hey,
but
I had a
you
really
literally
important
said,
question.
I have a serious question, and then you fell out. What's the serious question?
So I need an honest answer from everyone. When you hear the word pickerings, does it make you hungry for barbecue, or is it just me?
I know now why you dropped off.
It does now.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm hungry. I could
Every
go for
time
some
you
good
hear-
barbecue.
Every time you hear their name from here on out, think of the best barbecue you've ever had, and it makes you like these pickerings
Oh.
even more. Even more.
We need
Yeah.
to get them on the show. They're great people. I
So-
really feel the spirit when they're talking.
So Lance, it's your opinion that now is the time to repent. Now is the time to prepare. If there was ever a time, now is the time. And you're seeing these things. If Trump gets elected, what are you thinking?
That Israel is going to kind of go to town and cleansing things, and that somehow the destruction of the Dome of the Rock is going to be involved in that, which is going to be a hornet's nest and just horrible. But it's all pushing forward. It's all trying to polarize us. It's almost like God is like poking us with his stick, and he's being like, "Look, I'm going to make you guys all go to war so you can stop being enemies." Like Islam and Christianity, you guys are the people of the book. You all need to be brothers.
Gotcha.
Well, I'm just gonna give 2 cents. If you haven't caught, I'm just gonna say it very plainly for those that are watching, and that is, start seeking the face of the Lord now, before it's too late. Start seeking the face of the Lord, and before these 50 days are over, or start seeking the face of the Lord.
Hey, can I have a quick conversation before we end this? Because this is something that I'm kind of playing with in my mind. I haven't received a baptism of fire. And from what I've come to understand, most people that I've ever met, they haven't received the baptism of fire. But people are receiving baptism of fire. And I've read several experiences of them from LDS people. Some from non-LDS people are also getting a baptism of fire. Met some people who have told me about it, the experience, and what happened. And as I read in the scriptures, and I zoom back from this a little bit, the reason why I'm thinking about this is, what can I be doing in my life to get everything in order, right? And I'm looking at my personal salvation, and I'm saying, dude, if a baptism of fire is required to make my baptism worth it, or my baptism have credit, I also got to get the second piece of it. I would assume that we would need to do that before seeking the face of the Lord. That's my question. Or can that happen at the same time? You guys know what I'm asking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
What are your thoughts?
Both can happen at the same time, but I would say that having that baptism of fire before makes a lot of sense, that would be a step in the right direction. But the people that I've talked to that have had that experience, it's been a surrender moment. It's been a time period where they're just totally surrender, and they say, "Hey, I'm done doing it the way that I've been doing life." And you just kind of turn everything over and put everything on the Lord. And when I've talked to people, when they've done that, they have this overwhelming sense of that baptism of fire come upon them.
But kind of similar to how David has watched these NDEs, and people watch all these NDEs experience. I've watched tons of videos, read more of people's experiences that choose to share them, because some people mock them, but a lot of people are seeking after it. Like, it's their intention. They're putting it out there, right? And they're not in a bad place. They're not needing to really shift anything. They're raising their vibration. They're doing what they need to do.
To this for sure.
Well, I think, Trevor, before you go, David, I think asking for it is a good idea. Seeking for it is a good idea.
I think it's interesting that you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that when I first started my journey, my path, I was, at 13, I I think I may have had my baptism of fire before I actually got baptized, because when I had my dream and saw all the things in my dream, and at the end of my dream felt that burning, that love, joy, and peace, that took over. But my mindset before having that dream was, if this is real, I'll get an answer. If this is not, I won't get an answer. And when I got to the Book of Mormon, I had made a decision that if I get an answer as power, or any kind of answer from God, I have to be willing to follow it 100%. And I'm at a point now where, like, before I started Zion Media, I had made the decision, I'm just going to give everything up to the Lord. And my way of doing that was to start working at the temple, to just, completely sacrifice everything and be a temple ordinance worker. And those are just like some of my anchor points in my path to have a baptism of fire, or what you're talking about, Trevor.
I mean, my opinion is that you don't need it.
Hold on, say that, Lance.
I don't think that. So I think that everybody's different. When I had my Book of Mormon experience, I really did feel like I was on fire. I remember wondering if I was having a heart attack, because it was such a crazy, surreal experience. But as I reflect on that and talk to other people who haven't had it, I almost look at it like, let's say you have a girlfriend, when you're young, and maybe one person just gets like hot and heavy right away, and you start making out, and it's like, boom, like every endorphin hits your body, and you have this unbelievable experience that is so strong. But maybe someone else takes it bit by bit, and little by little they go from holding hands to doing this, and they never have this surreal, crazy, like, oh, I'm so in love with this person. I think that that's the same way with the baptism of fire and our love of God. It's kind of like on a parallel. It's not, you don't need to be looking for the bells and whistles.
I agree. I think more people have had their baptism of fire and don't realize that it's happened, because they're expecting some monumental burning bush type of experience, and they have had that baptism of fire that's happened over the course of different moments or events in their life.
Like more of a commitment.
Do you guys take that same theory with seeking the face of the Lord, or do you think that's an actual literal thing?
No, same thing, because everyone, I think, will have like the actual baptism of fire and the actual day of the Lord where they see the Lord when they die. So it's like, if you don't have it before you die, that doesn't mean you're not necessarily exalted, because from a lot of people, I think it happens when they die. And then there's the resurrection from levels of the spirit world to higher levels of the spirit world that Owaski talks about. That, like, the church exists in the spirit world just like it does here. And that when these end dates happen, like the 70th week, the entire church in the spirit world suddenly ascends, which then blesses the church here on earth, because now we have connection to a higher group consciousness, which has now reached a higher unity with God, and passes that knowledge down to us. And suddenly that group becomes ultra successful on earth.
I take it for that, bro.
I mean, that's what the Book of Catherine just said, right? That Israel would have that experience, and that as soon as they turn to the Lord in that way, they will now suddenly take Rome's place as the deciding, influential force in the world. They'll take Europe and Rome's place as the influential force. And that's the promise to the LDS people, right? That when that happens to us as well, that we will become the presiding influential force. We will take the evangelical and Protestant Christian church's place, who right now are the most influential people in America, and have their candidate, who is Trump. We will become the new people in America. And we got to prepare for that. This is all about calling people, especially the saints, to prepare our hearts and get ourselves right by looking at these sacrifices that happen, right? And reading and following the prophets, so that we can be worthy to be part of that next group that takes the lead in the world and helps bring peace in the millennium.
Absolutely. All right. Well, this has been an impromptu episode, a unique episode, and an episode to really reflect on. And I would say that the next decade may be the most important decade of this dispensation, and that we should do all we can to prepare ourselves, to sanctify ourselves, to have a broken heart and a contrite spirit, to surrender to the will of the Lord, and to do all we can to seek his face. And I will tell you this, and I've said this in other episodes, as you seek the face of the Lord, you should seek his face in those you come in contact with. Because if you can see him in those you interact with, then you will be prepared to see him. And if you can't see him in those you're interacting with, you probably won't recognize him if he comes to you. So do all you can to seek the face of the Lord by those you come in contact with. Do everything you can to make their day a little better than when you found it. Guys, anything in closing? David, Trevor, Lance, thank you so much. Oh, David, you got something?
Yeah, I was only going to just add that I take it very literal, seeking the face of the Lord in prayer and fasting. And, but I'm going to now add what you just said at the end, and seeing Christ in the faces of those that I serve.
Yeah. Dan, before we go, I do have something. You had mentioned to all of us that we wanted to get a live Q&A with Lance to cover the Heartland, the To Go No More Out, and this subject. So let's everybody get that on the calendar and do a live and let people ask questions, because super helpful. And then we've also talked, Lance, and I'm just going to put you on the spot here and we can edit this out if it doesn't go well. But let's have you on as a reoccurring theme and just, record 2 hours once a week, and we can break it up into 2 days. And dude, we could just go on forever and ever. I want to go back and see all the stuff that you skipped. You skipped through so much stuff, and I'm like, whoa, go back, bro.
So the date I'd like to set for the live would be 9/11.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
September the 11th. Live with Lance. Ask him any question. It's the day of Abaddon. 9/11 in the scriptures is the only scripture where Abaddon is mentioned.
Somebody told us today in the comments to look up, you guys should look up the 9/11 prophecy. And I was like, what's the 9/11 prophecy? Unless that's the Jonathan Cahn prophecy.
Yeah,
but I wonder if it's referring to something in the future, on a future 9/11. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
Tell us what it is.
It's on a Wednesday. So, Lance, if you could kind of plan your evening that day, or just look at your calendar, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work, but that's the date that came to me as I quickly asked when we should do it, and 9/11 popped in my head. So
sounds great.
We'll do a live with Lance on Wednesday, 9/11. You can ask him anything that he has on gathered in .1. But this has been awesome. Guys, thank you to everybody who jumped on to this special edition of the Key of David podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, share this video. If you haven't watched Lance's other videos that we're discussing, go watch them. The first one just aired tonight. Second, part 2, will air tomorrow. So go back and watch those, and you'll understand Lance's dreams a little better. Also, if you're interested in the Book of Ben Catherine, we're going to try and have it on downloadable on Zion Media, but you can also go to gatheredin.1 to get it. But Lance, thanks again for joining us late in the wee hours of the night. For myself, I'm Shane Baldwin. For my co-host, David the Lion Douglas, and the Key, Trevor Keys, we'll see you guys next time.
In the heart of Zion, where the truth shines bright, we gather the stories, bring the shadows to light. From the ancient prophets to the visions anew, we're here to explore, to learn, to renew. Zion Media, where the journey begins, unlocking the mysteries, where the Spirit wins. From the mountains of Mentina to the city of light, we're guiding the seekers through the darkest night. With the words of the prophets echoing in our soul, we dive into the scriptures, seeking to make us whole. From the plains of America to the temples on high, we uncover the secrets as the eagles fly by. Zion Media, where the journey begins, unlocking the mysteries, where the Spirit wins.